creating a actual custom piece of jewelry. We're going to be working with the client's scrap gold that we have already alloyed together into a 14 karat rose gold piece we can work with. We have the client's opal that had been chipped. We have actually polished out the chip, able to do that at the bench. But what the client had that was so creative about this project is the actual piece that chipped off. We're going to incorporate that into the project. Now, let me show you the project. There's actually several drawings on this envelope, and that's how sometimes as easy that it can be done, is sketching out a few ideas. It gives so much better. Well, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, it is. What we're doing today is called fabrication. This isn't going to involve creating a wax for the job and the custom piece of jewelry like so many other pieces of jewelry are, called the lost wax method. That's another path. This is fabrication. So we have our rough piece of bullion gold that we have alloyed to what we want, and we are going to roll it out via a expensive rolling mill. And I say expensive because this one has reduction gears that allows one person to be able to do it. I grew up using one that took one person on each hand, on each side with a hand crank, and it was a lot of muscle. But this is going to be much easier, hopefully. What we have to do is create the outer rim that you see for a plate. Okay, so we have to minimally make our piece of gold that large. Now, we're going to get it down to a particular thickness, so it actually may end up being larger than that, and we have to saw out the piece from there. But what we're going to be doing is we have this incredible crystal opal, and you see that this opal is going to be oriented on one side of the piece, and as you can see, we'll create a bezel around it. Difficult to stay in place, as you can see. All right, so this is going to be where the stone is. Then over here, this was just for a size idea, to give us an idea of how big we need to play. So we inverted it. This little mark here is where this very neat find, and that is, seldom do you ever get to actually find the chip that comes off the opal. Well, we have that, and we're going to place that somewhere in this vicinity. The client has a specific place. So when we get closer to that point, we'll notate exactly where. But the beginning part of the project is creating a plate of metal from this piece of what was scrap gold. Okay, we're over here at the rolling mill. If you're ever faced with the dilemma of getting a rolling mill, simple suggestion, get what's called one with the reduction gear that I just mentioned, instead of one with a handle on each side. It makes all the difference in the world and allows even the smallest of person to accomplish the task that you're getting ready to see me do. Now, it's all about gearing, of course, and here it is. So I'm left-handed, and the way this works is I have it set up for me, which is better to do it this direction. Now, what I will do is run this piece of metal through these bars. Now, I'm going to be running it through the flat section of the rolling mill bars, and as I go, I turn this portion down, lowering it, and while running it through one direction at a time. Always stay in the same direction. If you're ever, again, doing it, keep the metal always going the same way you started. All right, so we're going to do just a little bit at a time, and at one point or another, I determine that the metal is hard enough that it will need annealing. All metals, that's why you can break any kind of metal you know already by just bending it back and forth. Same thing here. We don't want it to break. We can accomplish that not doing so by heating it up, and I'll show you that. Okay, so here we go. Let's see how thick this is. All right, I feel that it passes right through. So I have these set through up here to run parallel, but you can actually run it at an angle if desired. And I just can tell by how much it grabs exactly, there we go, how much I'm really taking a bite, so to speak, out of it. And you see already a little flat area forming from just the very first time. So let's see how far we can go now. We will eventually run it in the other direction so that we can accomplish the size we want, but we can only do that after we anneal and soften the metal. There's already, I can tell, no doubt that this size and this amount of metal will accomplish the task of the project we're doing and making a plate that's large enough and hopefully leaving us enough metal left over to create the bezel we want and the bail, because we want all the metals to be the same color, and that's best achieved by using the original piece you made. Okay, I'm starting to see a little bit of where it really starting to crinkle, so to speak, at the edge. I think it's a good time to stop and heat the metal up and anneal it, and we'll show you how that's done. We have to soften our metal. By doing so, we're going to heat it up to a light pink color, so to speak. We apply the commonly used boric acid and alcohol. Of course, boric acid available anywhere. It's not dangerous, so to speak, as acids you would think. The alcohol is only used as a carrying agent, so that when it's burned off, as you see it doing now, it will leave behind the white film that will prevent the metal oxidizing to a point. Now, we are also, since we are going to be heating the surface up, we just want to put a flux on it to allow the surface to be able to kind of heat again evenly and without so much oxidation or issues that can occur with this particular alloy. Now, I'll often do this in a dim light so that you can actually see the light pink color sooner than we will in this light. It just gives me a little bit better control. But we do want it to heat it up to a color that is an obvious hot glow, as you see it approaching now. Doing it on a charcoal block, which prevents, of course, burning, or also causing issues with the metal at hand as far as sticking to it or anything. And so we just want it the color you see it now for a few seconds. And then when it returns to its original color, we will put it in the what's called the pickle pot, which removes the chemicals we just applied. I usually like to put it in the pickle pot when it's at a point that will still cause the liquid to boil. Okay, let's put it in the pickle pot. Okay, here we go. Heard it boil. So we're going to let that sit in there for just a few minutes, and then we'll steam it off. Now, what we'll be doing is going back and repeating the process. We'll do that over and over until we get to the size and the thickness desired. Then the next step is we cut it out to form. As I said, we were taking the piece of metal and continuing to roll it through the rolling mill, annealing it and softening the metal in between. It's a multi-step process to get it to the size we wanted, but we have gone ahead and done that. I then also have polished the metal, which allows you to be able to make markings on it, either with a scribe so that you have a permanent kind of line drawn on it, or with a indelible marker. And in saying that, I've gone ahead and done exactly that. I have laid out our design on the other side, so I know the direction we're going and needed for the size of the project. And of course, you see we have the roughly the position of the other piece of opal that came off of this piece that we have recut. And the bale will be going and centered at the top up here, and will be used and created from the scrap metal after sawing out the outer part of the drawing. Now, why I drew it like that was because I took the size I needed and expanded outwards on that. You can't add metal back. If you have this piece of metal, you want to make sure that you allow extra space to the outside. Better safe than sorry is certainly the case in this situation. So I'm going to take my saw blade and I'm going to saw out the outer shape of that. Then in doing that, it will, for one thing, give me the scrap pieces of metal that I'm going to need, and I will be reforming those to create so the bezel and the bale. By doing so, I am assured that the color of the metals are going to match and that we still use all the original sentimental part of the gold that was brought to us to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and with what we call a jeweler's saw and frame, and these blades. Now, as a something humorous, in the shop we used to talk about the blades and the use of them. They are so finely made that really they break very easily, and they're not inexpensive. In actuality, they're over 25 cents a piece, and at the rate that you can break them, you can actually break 10 of them sawing this if you do it incorrectly. Now, I knew this jeweler once that up on his wall he had, in the tube that these come in, one single saw blade, and it was framed out nicely in this glass case. And he said, still have my original first saw blade. And what he did was he used it with one stroke, then put it up, and so he could make the claim that he has the first saw blade still from the very beginning, which is impossible. Every jeweler breaks a saw blade. So it's how many you break. I usually use a 3/0 is what they call it. They come in different sizes, but there's a correct way to do it and an incorrect way. You do it incorrectly and you are going to break a lot of blades, and your line, it's going to be difficult. Main thing is saw straight up and down. So I'm going to get going on that, and what we'll do is we'll start at an outer edge that's close to the metal and just follow that pattern. We'll fine tune and shape the pattern by sanding it afterwards. So I'm going to get started. The key, one of them, to not breaking saw blades is to use a wax, and just the common beeswax actually works very well. So you'll do that several times throughout the process. And the other thing is you want to saw and straight up and down. You want to use your jeweler's frame straight up and down. And once you get started, it can go quite quickly. Okay, as simple as that. Now, we have our scrap metal that we will either use it as it is, because I can possibly create the bale from parts of it, but if not, we'll melt it down and rerun it through the rolling mill to be able to get the shape we want and the size of the metal we want for the bezel and the bale. Now, you can see I made sure I went even a little bit to the outside of my drawing, allowing plenty of room to get the shape I want, which is a symmetrical shape, working with that. So what we'll do for the next process is going to be sanding and getting my outer form, because the rest of the symmetry and bezel and the position of the other piece of opal will all be based on the outside shape. What I've done is I've gone ahead, and you can see the outline of the scrap metal, and I only lost the thickness of the saw blade by way of metal loss. Of course, it's recovered in the drawer. Now, with the shape I have, I still have allowed some room for final editing, so to speak, final shaping to get the symmetry just the way I want after we place the bezel on and the bail. I have created a center mark up there so that I can follow the lines there and work around that point. So the next step you're going to see is we create the bezel from our scrap metal and the bail. We'll sweat solder that on, something that you've never seen before done, and it is going to be an amazing custom project that you will, and this is what is called handmade. It's not through the process of fabrication. So it's not a casting technique, it's a totally separate technique, and one that fills in a lot of gaps at the bench. So I hope you've enjoyed getting to see us take a piece of metal, creating the alloy and the color that we wanted, rolling it out to the dimensions that we needed, and then sawing it and shaping it to the final form, where next we go to the step of applying the bezel and the veil. So I'm glad you have joined me in this episode of how it's done, and I look forward to seeing you for the next segment of the project.